G'day everyone and welcome to another edition of the Weekend Wrap brought to you by Crowcast. Round 13, of course, against last year's premiers, the Brisbane Lions, and what a happy outcome it was, and lots to talk about tonight. And without any further ado, let's crack straight in, shall we? Look at them all, the Rose Gallery there. G'day everyone and welcome to the Weekend Wrap again this weekend, round 13, wrapping up the game versus Brisbane. And joining me as always, we have a full cohort. Brownie, how are you, sir?
Very good, thanks, mate.
Macca, sober tonight?
No. Oh, absolutely.
Been to a meeting, just got it all sorted?
No, we had the family over, but we only just had cake and coffee, so all good.
What, rum cake?
No.
And big man, how are you, sir?
Good, thanks, Fiend. In Nix we trust, baby.
Oh, let's not
Maybe.
get carried away.
Yeah.
Just fired an early shot there. Oh, look, it was pretty good, wasn't it? And I know, Brownie, you went. Big man, did you go?
Yeah, I did, and it was something else, but that's all right. It was actually a pretty good crowd considering.
Oh, you boys are braver than me. Bloody hell, Brownie, I was thinking of you on Friday night while I was tucked at home, nice and warm and dry.
I was at least out of the rain, but yeah, it was like, the crowd was a bit disappointing, but I think they got turned away by the conditions. But 42 was still pretty loud, especially when that final siren went. It was really loud.
Yeah, start of the fourth, it kicked up a notch, didn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it was good.
Very good. Now, we are competing against a riveting Carlton v Essendon game. So we might be a little bit down on numbers, but thanks to those who have joined us on the Discord chat and also on YouTube. Don't forget, if you're on Discord and you want to have your say, then stick your virtual hand up and we will definitely get you on board. But exciting times. Why don't we just, without any further ado, why don't we just crack straight into the match analysis, because we're just flying high at the moment. Crows 10-8-68. The Lions 8-15-63, a 5-point margin in the end. And Brownie, at the game, it sounded like you were a bit disappointed with the first three quarters, but I wasn't so negative about it.
I suppose the first three quarters, just a bit of ball use, but the encouraging thing was we stayed in the game. I thought our pressure was fantastic the whole game. I thought that was the real positive. I thought the negative was our ball use in the first three quarters was a bit below standard compared to theirs, and just the way they were setting up. I think they sort of controlled the ball a bit, but it was just great that we were able to hang in there, and a bit of luck went our way, I think, overall in that last quarter, and we got the job done.
Do you think it was luck, big man?
Definitely a fair bit of luck going on, and also just a lack of composure and method in the last 5 to 10 minutes. But at the same time, it wasn't luck that made us have a 5-goal streak and come back from a position where I thought, particularly in the wet, I thought we were pretty much done. So as much as the final parts of the game where we did get a bit lucky with their goal kicking, I was so proud of how we went about it to get ourselves in front in the first place, because in previous years that wouldn't have happened. That game was pretty much done. If it was even last year, that game was done, whereas this year there's just something different. So I'm not elated with how we closed out the game, but I'm very happy with how we got ourselves back into it.
It got out to 21 points at one stage, Macca, and I think 21 odd points middle of the third. Do you think it was luck that won us the game?
No, I don't. I disagree with the other two boys. I thought it was an outstanding win by the Crows, really, given the wet, slippery conditions and the fact that nobody's ever really talked about them in the media or whatever. We had, in the first quarter, we kicked 0-6, and our kicks, most of those were kickable goals, and made the distance, but we kicked bloody points. Remember the one that Curtin on the run, for example. That was just a gimme. So I thought, we made it hard for ourselves by doing that, and we sort of trailed by a couple of goals, which increased to three goals by three-quarter time. And the task looked hard, but I think, like a good side does, we actually responded and we got those 5 goals in. I think it's a brilliant burst of football by some players who really did some very clever things in that particular period. Now, Brisbane aren't premiers for nothing. I mean, they were always going to respond to that, and they did respond. But I thought we held very tight. They talk about the 8 shots for goal, but 4 of those were touched, so they were rushed behind. They weren't never going to be a goal anyhow. So look, we had a bit of luck there going our way, but we had no luck, or we blew our luck in the first quarter. So I think we had a bad quarter of luck. They had a bad quarter of luck. Overall, we ended up winning the game, so we deserved to win. That's the way I see it.
Well, I think, they had 8 points and 2 or 3 out of bounds on the full. But I think part of the reason they were peppering the goals, and we'll talk about our tactics towards the end of the game in a little while, but if they kick one of those goals, then the ball goes back to the centre and the whole dynamic of the game changes. So I don't think you can necessarily say that if they'd have kicked all their goals, they would have won, because if they'd have kicked the first one, say if Devon Robertson or whatever had kicked one of those goals, then the ball goes back to the middle and the whole thing resets. So I'm not so sure. Certainly the tactics at the end were questionable, and like I said, we'll have a chat about that. But I'm with you, Macca. I think that our ability to stay in the game and come back 3 times in the wet from 3 or 4 goals down at various stages was a testament, because halfway through the second, it looked like the game was gone. It looked like they were going to run away and win by 6 or 7 goals. And the fact that we basically drew even at half-time, it blew out a little bit again in the third quarter, and then we started to chip away, and then that scintillating burst in the last. I mean, a sign of a good side is one that stays in the game, and in those conditions, under that sort of pressure, and the weight of expectation, I actually was extremely impressed. And we'll talk about individuals later, but I feel like we're seeing the emergence of a couple of players, Brownie, that we can. One of the knocks on our previous contending squads was that we couldn't rely on our senior players in big moments, and I just feel like we're starting to see the emergence of a few blokes that will become key for us over the next 5 years, who don't wilt under that pressure and actually stand up to it.
Yeah, I thought, case in point, that last quarter, like Dawson had been held pretty well for the first 3, but he stepped up and he was a massive part of those first 3 goals. And he just came out with a determination to lead by example. And you could argue that, he was the impetus for us to get back in the game and to win the game. And he was, unbelievable. To have a leader that can do that, it's pretty good that he's got gears, and he realised he was getting sort of owned a bit, and he just came out with this determination and he got the job done.
Yeah. They definitely made a decision. I think it was one of them, either Dawson or Nix in the post-match, said that they made a decision to open it up at the beginning of the last, and Geordie just took it upon himself, and he was involved in the first 3 goals, big man, and that hang that he took over Thilthorpe for the third one, and the fact that he was able to slot it, that was just inspirational.
Yeah, that was big, really big. That was Dusty Martin sort of levels of just taking control of the game.
Yeah.
I don't know, if you ask Fags, he still thinks Dunkley got the points, but not so sure about that. I thought he, obviously Dunkley curtailed him, particularly in that third quarter, but his first half was all right, and that last quarter was unbelievable. And it wasn't just him, there was a few others too, but he was the driving force behind our comeback. And look, every game that goes past, we just get more and more thankful that he chose us to come to us, 3 or 4 years ago. It's for what we paid for him. But like, even if we paid a first, a top 5 pick, it would have been worth it. The way he's played and now he's led this club.
Yeah, Mac, I don't know whether you saw Fagan's post-match presser or heard about it, but my impression was it wasn't so much that he thought that they should have won. I actually think that he didn't want to give us anything, knowing that they're going to have to get past us to get to a grand final this year, and he just didn't want to give us any sort of credit whatsoever.
Look, I've always liked Fagan, and I've always thought, he's done a great job with Brisbane, and I've always respected what he said. But I was annoyed with him for the first time.
Oh no, you can't take. I don't think you can take it at face value, Macca. I think that was tactical. I think that was. So? Well, of course, he's talking about a rival and a rising team. And I think he walks from that going, I'm not going to give them any credit. I'm just going to make sure that they think in my eyes, they were lucky.
Yeah, look, you're probably right, actually, when you do think about it, because he never talks rubbish. And I was surprised for him to say that. So, yeah, you're probably spot on there, Frank. I really hadn't looked at it that way. I was just pissed off when he said it. But as you said, he is very measured with what he said. So, yeah, it would have been said for a reason when you think about it. I just want to just take another point about what Big Man was saying about Dunkley on Dawson. Dawson is such a great player that he's got this bloke making it hard for him to get the ball. So, but what does Dawson do in return? He laid how many tackles did he lay? It was some massive 11 tackles.
Yeah, 14.
So 14. I mean, it's incredible. The guy is incredible. So, okay, I'll get restricted here, and then when the game's in really crunch time, takes that enormous mark. I mean, the man, as Big Man said, if we'd paid a top 5 pick, if we played 2 top 5 picks, we've got a bargain. He's outstanding.
Yeah, it seemed to me, Brownie, that Brisbane just came and played the way Brisbane always play. They didn't seem to do much different. I was surprised that they put Zorko on Keys, because how can you expect a 35-year-old man to outrun that beast all night? I would have put him on Rochelle and made Rochelle accountable defensively. And I think that was a real tactical miss by Fagan, to be honest with you.
Yeah, you're probably right. I mean, Keys has just got such a motor. I think, and I think, his game was exceptional. He just covered that much ground, worked so hard, still laid the tackles when he needed to. He was creative, and kicking clutch goals. He was, in my opinion, he was probably our best player. And just, I don't think that matchup worked for them. But I suppose there's, on the other hand, if he went to Rochelle, it might have been gone the other way. So, but it's hard to mount up. We've got Rankin run through the forward line. We've got Keys and we've got Rochelle. It's a pretty tough ask for any defence to manage all 3.
100%, and that's starting to emerge. Not only everyone's been focusing on our big, tall forwards, but our small brigade with Rash and Rankin and Keys and A&B providing some defensive work, and Peatling rolling through there occasionally, and now Berry rolling through there occasionally. Surely it's the toughest forward line in the competition, and I don't know whether there's a team that matches up. Like if we don't get him with our tools, we'll get him with our smalls, Big Man.
Yeah, and I mean, not only that, but because we're playing Rankin in the guts more than we have been previously. Obviously, we did a bit last year, but particularly this year, it's meant that those guys have had to stood up and getting Neil Ball into the team, who didn't have a huge game on the weekend, but He's one. Keys has continued his form from last year, which was always really good. If not playing a little bit better, I think this year. Although touch and go because he did win a BNF last year, but Rochelle is the one, isn't he? He's the one that's taking his game to another level. And it's a shame he had that rib injury because he missed 3-4 games because of that, including the one where he got injured because it was so early in the game. He'd be in All-Australian contention for sure. Like his score involvements, his goals that he's kicked himself, and the clutch moments he's had. Apart from that Collingwood game where he missed a couple that he could have kicked, he's been really clinical in front of goal, and it makes such a difference, particularly against a great team like Brisbane, to kick those goals at those crucial times. I think we missed him when we didn't have him. He's brought such a zest to our team, and that brigade there, particularly, and also when Rankin goes down there, it's not. I don't know if it's the best. I think Geelong's is pretty good too, but it's up there for sure. And the Tors weren't never going to have a big night given the conditions. So the way in which Rochelle and the other boys stood up was we needed them to, and they did, which was great to see.
Yeah. Now, Fagan in his post-match made a lot of noise about the stats and said, they won every stat and yada, yada, yada. There's an interesting stat that they didn't win, which I think is a key indicator of how we have changed the way that we've played over the last 3 or 4 weeks, since probably the Collingwood game. And that is the post-clearance ground ball stat. I feel like, Macca, we've changed the way that we play in that we are not, like, we've lost clearance the last couple of weeks, but we've won the first possession out of clearance stat, and we've won the ground ball stat post clearance. And I feel like we're giving away a little bit of clearance in order to corral the contest, very similar to what Collingwood do, and protecting the ground rather than trying to get the ball to the outside, because coinciding with our clearance stats going down, our uncontested possession stats have also gone down, and we're no longer win the ball and get it to the outside team. We're now a contest team. Have you noticed any shift in that regard?
Well, we're not playing that gun and run game that we used to play. There's no doubt about that. But, one that we played for the first few weeks when we were scoring high, but allowing the opposition to score high as well. So I don't know whether it's just the centre bounce. I just think overall we're playing a totally different, much tighter style of game, and which is a little bit like the Collingwood model. I think. I reckon we've tried to adapt some of the learning from Collingwood, because what they do. Yeah. No, I'm agreeing with you. I'm agreeing with you that we have done that.
I think so.
And as a result of that, we have restricted scores a lot, and like Collingwood do. When there's an error made, then you go for the burst back the other way rather than just trying to do it all the time non-stop. Just as it is a lot of times of playing it very safe and just waiting for an error. So there has definitely been a change in our game plan, and from what we started the season with to what we're playing now, it's a much more combative, competitive type of game style, and I think it's a smarter game style, because you don't give away those easy goals that we used to give away before.
I'm not sure whether we got the balance right, but Brownie, I'm wondering whether at the ground it was evident to you, because I think the other thing that's increased, and I'm a bit of a stats person, but I think stats don't tell you the future, but they certainly give you an indication of, like, confirm what you're seeing. And the other stat that's increased is our scores off front half turnovers, and it seems to me that, and it's probably a little bit to do with the weather over the last few weeks as well, but it seems to me that we're gaining territory and then trying to force forward half turnovers in front of centre to get repeat entries, and our scores from front half entries have gone through the roof.
Yeah. And I thought on Friday night, I think that was on the back of just our pressure was continuous. We didn't sort of give up. That I think that they did get a lot more of the ball. They had a lot higher possessions, but a lot of them were possessions under pressure, and we just continued the battle. And where we would have got blown out of the water, a year or two ago, we were keeping the pressure on, not letting them get a run on, and then we were, they probably had, I think, a fair bit more time in their forward half. But when we had it in our forward half, we were really putting the pressure on, getting turnovers, and I think that has changed a lot from how we were playing earlier in the year. Absolutely.
Previously, big man, we were getting a lot of scores off defensive, like rebound 50s. But now our scores off front half turnover has increased, and I think that's his or the coaching staff's way of trying to protect the scoreboard a bit. And I don't dislike it. I don't know whether we've necessarily got the balance quite right just yet, but I don't dislike it, particularly as you work through the winter months when things slow down and you rely less on disposal chains and more about territory.
Well, obviously, particularly in the rain, it becomes much harder to chain uncontested possessions out of defence. And if you can put pressure on and force the turnover, you're obviously going to get those repeat inside 50s. And I think it's twofold. There's obviously the conditions have definitely had a part to play, but just I think our pressure in general has just ramped up as well. I think we're fourth for tackles per game in the AFL, but I would say to my eye, we might be the best tackling team in the AFL at the moment. And the pressure we're putting on opposition defences is really, really strong, which is a great sign going forward because it's so important. And it's interesting that we are probably pressing up a bit more because what we talked about, a month or two ago about how opposition halfbacks in particular were having field days against us.
Yeah.
And that hasn't been the case lately. Blakey had a shocker. Zorko wasn't particularly great on the weekend. And I think Marich was the designated kicker for West Coast, and he got shifted to the wing. He was playing so badly. So we've definitely pressed up higher and not allowed as much easy exits out of defence. Unfortunately, our midfield and stoppage game has sort of gone to water a little bit, but that's another matter. But yeah, I'm pretty happy, and I think it is also conducive to the conditions when things open up a bit more later in the year. I think it'll be important to get that run and gun from defence back up and running as much as we can because when by the time September runs around, there's going to be a lot more goals scored from that avenue. But obviously at the moment when it's pissing down, it's much harder to do that.
Yeah. All right, let's have a look at some of the AFL stats because not that they tell us much, but that's what most people see. We got done in disposals by 60 or 70 odd, 375 to 300 their way. Kicks 207 to 235. They handballed a lot more, 94 to 140, which kind of, as I was saying, I felt like Brisbane didn't actually put a lot of time into the game. They just rocked up and played their way. And I don't know whether they necessarily adapted to the conditions terribly well. Disposal efficiency was similar. Inside 50s, 47 to 60. They had a mountain of inside 50s in the last, obviously. Couldn't convert. Efficiency inside 50. Surprisingly, our efficiency, even though we kicked straighter, was lower, 43 to 48. So I'm not quite sure how that works. But anyway, marks inside 50 was even. Centre clearances 6 to 7. Stoppage clearances was 30 to 48. Hitouts, Riley O'Brien won that pretty tight tussle with Darcy Fort, 58 to 49. Contested possessions 144 to 157. Uncontested possessions again, they had a lot more free ball. I felt like again we were very consistent in the way that we defended. We didn't mind them getting first use out of the contest, but our pressure on the second possession was pretty extreme, and I would have loved to have seen what that efficiency rating was. Mark 62 to 73, turnovers 72 to 75, but indicative of what you and Brownie were saying, big man. Tackles 89 to 63 in our favour. And I felt that was indicative of the pressure that we applied to them out of those contested situations.
Yeah, well summed up. I mean, in terms of the midfield battle, it felt like they were definitely cleaner and they used by hand a lot more out of stoppage. I think Ashcroft had a great game for them, particularly that first half. He was
So
a
did
bit of a problem, actually.
McCluggage was good.
Yeah, well, he's just class, isn't he? He makes great decisions.
Yeah.
But it was nice to see Neil not destroy us for once. And obviously Dunkley had his hands full with Dawson. So, I think in an ideal world, we do a lot better in the midfield. And it does feel like, particularly against those really high-end midfields, we are still coming up a bit short. But the good positive is that we're finding other ways to win than just, obviously winning through the midfield. I guess the question is, will that stand up in finals when pretty much every team we come up against will be at the higher end in terms of their stoppage craft and the talent they got in there? And do we have to... do we have the talent required to get the job done when finals are on the line? So it'll be interesting to see.
Well, Mac, I don't know. I think we've injected Sam Berry into the midfield, and I would hope that that remains the case when Matt Crouch gets fit again. Soligo, Jake's a funny one because he looks like he's struggling, and yet Nick's put him on Lockie Neal in that last quarter, and Soligo did a fantastic job on him, and 13 tackles for the match for Jake shows his hard work. I just feel like he's a bit one-paced at the moment, hasn't got a second gear. And then, of course, we've got Dawson, who's not spending as much time in there, Rankin, who floats through there, and I'd still like to see more about Rash. And Peatling, obviously, has now become our main grunt midfielder. Do you think it's just a matter of persisting with that rotation?
Well, we don't really have a lot of choice because that's what we got. And look, I think Big Man's 100% right. In the one area that worries me, and it was one of the big differences in the game, actually, was the quality of the midfields. They have an enormously qualified midfield. I mean, you look at it. Will Ashcroft is an outstanding player. McCluggage is an outstanding player. Berry rolls through there. He's outstanding. Neil's outstanding. We're talking about probably a midfield of a different level. I think if we line up the sides, I think our forward line is probably the best in the AFL. I don't think there's anyone that's got as much versatility. I think in our defence is very solid, very good. It's up to final standard. The one thing that's going to catch us out in the finals is, unless the way our boys play out of their skin, is because they've got to play better because our midfield, I reckon we're short one really, really classy midfield, like a real top guy. And I think we're good enough to make finals. I think we won't make a flag this year because I think we're just short that one midfielder at this stage.
Well, Brownie, what do you think of that? Because I could counter what Macca said by the fact that Collingwood don't have outstanding clearance stats as well, and they're the best team in the comp.
Yeah. On the weekend, I thought that Brisbane tended to set up behind the stoppage and have free players, and they get a chain of handballs. But they kept doing it. It was almost like we know they're going to do it, and we're happy to do it,
yeah.
and then we're waiting for the next. We're waiting to the next contest.
100%.
And the only time that can come undone is if they can get a chain of handballs and bring our defence out of line. But in that kind of game where the weather's not great and you're pretty much a couple of handballs, then you're going to have to kick, I think it worked pretty well for us. I was getting frustrated at the game that they were getting their hands on it first and they had that chain of one or two handballs, and it was consistent in the first, second and third quarter. But when you look at it, the fact that we didn't try and counter it, but I think with our midfield, to answer your original question, we haven't quite got the high-end talent, but I think it's just a case of us being a bit more accountable in the, especially centre clearances, and at stoppages, we just need to be a bit more accountable. So if they've got guys that have got off the chain, we've got to put a bit more time into them. Whereas at the moment, we don't seem to really do it. And getting back to the Ligo, if you acknowledge the fact that he was given a job on Lachie Neale in that last quarter, I mean, he had 18 possessions for the game, and I thought he was fantastic. I thought he might look like he's not moving as well for whatever reason, but his input and his effectiveness, it was just as good as it ever has been.
I guess because he, for the first three quarters, was pretty much on McCluggage and Berry, and they both got a fair bit of it. But as you say, I reckon at the moment they've got our midfield running a little bit differently, like I said earlier, and your observation is it kind of backs that up, that we almost happy to concede at certain times, to not commit too many to the contest in stoppage clearance. And, I think you're right. I think that can put you under pressure at times, because you can give up territory very easily, and you give them uncontested use of the ball and they can use it. And Brisbane weren't decisive going at a forward 50. So, they didn't, and you could argue they didn't have a lot of targets up forward, to be honest with you, which I think hurts them at the moment. Hitwood doesn't fire a shot. Cameron's been really quiet, so they rely on Rayner and a couple of others floating forward, Zach Bailey and a couple of others. So, Lohman's another, and he didn't really have a big game either. So, I think that's a real problem for them at the moment. Their avenue to goal, it's like they've got such a gold-plated midfield, but they probably don't have they probably wish they had our forward line, to be honest with you. But by the same token, I feel like our back six is getting to a point where it's almost Ben Rutten, Nathan Bassett like. The way Worrell, Keane and Butts have been working together. Butts played a really good role on Hitwood, shut him right out. Worrell in that last quarter was immense. Their positioning, him and Mark Keane positioned themselves really well in the back half. And then we've got Michael Annie at ground level, who blanketed Charlie Cameron. And Rory Laird, who I didn't think had a bad game. And to be perfectly honest with you, I felt it was a really good move to put Brodie Smith on Cam Rayner in the last, and I thought Smithers did a really good job, big man.
He did.
Yeah, I think in general our defence was really good. And to be fair, when it's pouring rain, it's obviously that's a defender's dream, because they can be mismatched or out of position or whatever and still not get scored on, because it's so much harder to mark the ball and compete at when it's raining like it did on Friday night. But at the same time, we found an avenues to go on. I think Rayner was their most dangerous forward. He had a really good game, but apart from that, it's a lot of them were out of it. And Bailey could have had a big game, obviously, but if not for his kicking. But I'm pretty stoked with how all those guys are going at the moment. Worrell was great again. Hingy, I thought actually Hinge had a really solid game with his intercept work. As you said, Max kept Cameron to that one goal, that stoppage goal, which to be fair was a great one, where he was blocked.
That was just a block, yeah. It was a good block.
Max, but we know Max is just so hard to play on. So he's a weapon for us, because typically small forwards haven't got a massive hold on us this year, which is always nice. And then who the other ones back there? Like Keane was pretty solid again. Obviously, again, it was a tough night for the forwards. I thought Logan Morris actually did okay considering. And Smithy, as you said, like he, a couple of his kick-outs I wish weren't so predictable, but at the same time, he did bring some energy and run, which is what you want from a sub. So. And Lairdy was pretty solid too, apart from that check side kick out of fullback. That was nice to see out of the full. But
well, that's what I talk about our old school players being unreliable in big moments. And yes, he backed it up with a tackle, but that's exactly the sort of shit that we used to do back in the mid 2015s and all that. And you'd have like Richie Douglas falling over everywhere and bloody Letty kicking it out of bounds or straight up. And that's the sort of shit. Whereas I feel like we've got blokes like Keenan Worrell and Dawson and Rochelle and Riley Thilthorpe and that goal that Riley kicked to kick it off in the last. I mean, he's 200 centimetres. Brownie, he's 200 centimetres, for God's sake. That would have happened right under your nose too, if I remember where you sit.
It was right under my nose. He had absolutely no right to make that look so easy, did he? He didn't even like steady and take 3 or 4 steps. He basically changed direction and kicked the ball in 2 steps. And it was just a perfect...
And it was a little bit outside of the foot too. It wasn't even it's front on kick. It was a little outside of the foot kick.
Yeah, and it didn't deviate. He made that look ridiculous, like he was 5'8", and for the biggest guy in the comp, just about to do that was ridiculous. Not many big guys have the skills that he's got. That's for sure.
Yeah. So, I feel like, and we can get into talking about the tactics now at the end, I guess. But I feel like we've got blokes that can stand up in big moments, and we have less of those panic merchants, and the ones that are left are just about gone. So we could probably endure them for another season or so. But look, with 7 minutes to go, we're up by a couple of goals after having that big burst and that Jordan and Dawson induced opening up of the game. I'm really interested, Brownie and Big Man, in your observations of what happened after that. Brownie, maybe you first and then Big Man.
Well, to the naked eye, it looked like earlier in the quarter, Brodie Smith a couple of times when he was kicking out went more centrally in order to attack, and that sort of paid off. And it looked like once we had that 11-point lead, every kick out after that was down the line. It looked like we put our cue in the rack and we just decided to play safe football. I don't know, Big Man, if that's the way you saw it.
Well, that's the thing. As we played safe football, but we played dumb safe football, and I think. Particularly that last 4 or 5 minutes, we don't seem to have a method for controlling the ball with switches and short passes and going backwards and forth to kill time. Now, I know it's wet. This isn't the first time this happened. This happened in the showdown as well. Our players are clearly not instructed to look backwards, to find space in those pockets, switch it around. If you look at our players, it's not even their mindset. They're not looking for space to take uncontested marks at all. It's basically just they're clearly just told, get it down the line, force a contest, and we'll go from there, and just take territory. And that's great if you're winning the contest, but we weren't really winning the contest particularly well in that game throughout, and then we really lost hold of the ball in that last 5 minutes.
Well,
and
that was the thing that annoyed. Sorry, mate. That was the thing that annoyed me. If you're going to have that tactic, then surely you put everyone around there. Like, you just put 20 players around there. Like, the amount of times that ball would go over the back of the marking contest and they had 2 blokes free and they just ping it straight back in. So why haven't we got blokes around the contest? If that's the plan, then we should have everyone around that contest and just bottle it up and force a stoppage, if that's what the plan is. But it seemed like not everyone was on the same page, and I think that's the bit that worries me, is that we don't seem to be organised. We don't have we can talk about the desire to continue to attack in a minute, but just that whole defensive action, it doesn't look like everyone's on the same page, Mac.
But it's not just about. Sorry, Mac, I'll let you go soon. But I was just saying, it's not about just about attacking or whether you're playing defensive or attacking or whatever. It's the way in which you go about it. And I'm telling you, like, this is not the first time now. Our players are clearly not told to time waste by going lateral or backwards, and I'm not sure why that's the case. Like, why aren't our defenders able to sort of clear out that our back 50 and allow for cheap uncontested marks. That would have made such a difference. Particularly those last 3 minutes where, we could have burnt 1.5 minutes and then go long to the contest and take territory. But for whatever reason, it seemed like, no, we're just going to go long each time. It'd come out the back, Darcy Wilmot or whoever would get the ball and it's coming back inside 50 again. So I look, the fact that Nix and Dawson said that things went wrong in that last quarter suggests to me that that's not the plan. Well, it's certainly not entirely the plan that we want to go about it. But it is worrying to me that our defenders didn't even look like they wanted to try and possess the ball.
Yeah, mate.
Yeah, look, I think Big Man's quite right. I mean, it is Brisbane stats are padded to some degree. Their stats, as you said, they had a lot more possession than we did. But they do that in terms of instead of just attacking directly, at times they just move it backwards, sideways, etc. Even though they're not trying to time waste, they're just waiting to look for that little error or positioning of players so that they can make an attack through that. What Big Man's saying is that the reverse of that, of course, is that if you're the one that's under pressure, then and you're trying to hang on to a lead, I mean, the good sides really do manage to do it well. Collingwood do it well, and Brisbane do it well in the sense of moving it laterally rather than trying to attack straight down the centre or down the sides or whatever you might think, wherever it might be. You just hold it, you're wasting time, and eventually there will be an opening where you might have 3-on-2 or something like that. And it's just not in our DNA at the moment. It's just not in our DNA. And
I don't know about DNA, Mac. I don't know about DNA. There's no effort to because when you're in those situations, and you could argue that 7 minutes to go was too far out, but when you're in those circumstances, it's about maintaining possession. And as soon as you kick to a contest, you're inviting the opposition to win the ball back. And we don't even seem to care about maintaining possession. We're quite happy to go to a 50-50.
Yeah, and I'm totally agree with you. And that is a weakness at the moment. As I hope that, I think with better assistance that we have at the moment, that that might be introduced into our game. That we do that. It should be something you do automatically in those situations. And as I say, the sides have been up there for a long time. They do it automatically. And as you say, we don't make any attempt at all. So it's something that's got to be introduced into our game if we're going to be successful in the really, really tight games, and when you're trying to either hang on or just, moving it around looking for an opening, or just time wasted. It's got to be introduced into our game plan.
I guess the thing that worries me, Brownie, is that we had full momentum in the first 5 to 10 minutes of that quarter. We had them on the ropes. We'd opened the game up. We was overlap running. We had an open forward line. We were getting them out the back, all that sort of stuff. We had them absolutely on toast. We'd broken the game open. And good teams, in my opinion, in those positions will not take the foot off the throat. And what we've done now against Geelong, against Port Adelaide, against Collingwood, we don't seem to have the ability to continue to attack while we have that momentum. And that we keep other teams in the game, in my opinion, by doing so.
Yeah, I mean, we can do it against the lower teams, but we it's almost like we don't try to do it against the better sides. That was obviously a tactic. It wasn't that they just stopped attacking. Oh well, I would hope it was a tactic, but it was a pretty flawed tactic. It was shocking. The thing that blew my mind, just talking of possessing the ball and trying to maintain a lead, was like 16 seconds out. Our last kick out with 16 seconds to go. Surely at that point you're trying to kick to a player, because one kick you've wasted 11 or 12 seconds, and then the next kick's long and you've won the game. But we had 3 or 4 guys in the middle of the ground. Not one of them made a lead to the eastern side of the ground. Not one of them. They just stayed there. They were stagnant. Now, even if they didn't want to kick, they should have at least given an option. But that wasn't even in their mindset to give an option. And Brodie Smith went down the line. Now that ended up well, but it could have come back easily in 16
100%.
seconds inside 50, and they have a shot at goal. And that was just like amateur for a competition where they're playing. It's a big money competition now. To not get that kind of stuff right at the end of the game was really, really disappointing.
Again, because it's not the first time. And, I would hope it's probably the biggest flaw in our game right now, in my opinion, because, like, as I said earlier, we came back at Brisbane 3 times during the game. We haven't been blown out at all this season. We've been in just about every game. You could argue probably the Freo game we were never really in, even though we came back a bit in the last, but we were miles behind. But, these tight situations, this is what I think we were talking about this a week or two ago about mindset, and this is where I worry about Matthew Nicks in terms of his overall negative mindset and his lack of trust in the players to be able to execute. And I don't care what you say. If you have a team that lacks trust and belief, and I think this goes back to what Fagan said post pressure. He does nothing but back his players in all the time. McRae's exactly the same. He backs his players in all the time. Win or lose, he will not say anything negative about his players. And I feel like that gives them the belief and the license to go about it in a positive way in those tight moments. I don't think we yet have a mindset around the club that fully trusts the players to be able to execute in tight situations, Mac.
Yeah, look, I think we went through bad periods and bad times, and I don't think Mix has really adjusted himself on those particular days. But our team is so much better, and but he has adjusted certain parts of our game plan, but no, not totally. And but as the boys have said, I totally agree with them that we still play just the standard game plan we do with just a lot more endeavour, etc. And we've got perhaps better some quality players, but we're still not playing the perfect game plan for certain situations. And I think the boys described it pretty well, really.
Well, there you go. Brownie and Big Man, you've had the Macca endorsement, so you can
that.
Go home happy now. Well, let's talk about a couple of individuals. Ben Keys, we touched on earlier. He had 20 touches, 5 tackles, 3 goals, 7 inside 50s, 8 score involvements, 372 metres gained. I thought one of the telling stats was the ball that Zorko didn't get in the first half and a bit. Zorko only had, I think, 9 touches, and I think 3 or 4 of those were kick-ins in that first half, and they get a lot of drive from Dane Zorko out the back half, and Ben Keys just ran him ragged, and made him accountable and hurt him the other way, and took him out of the game, took him to places he didn't want to be, and you got to have nothing but respect for Ben Keys, because a bloke that wouldn't look out of place in Divi 2 in terms of his skills and all the rest of it, Divi 2 ammos, and yet he is an absolute machine, and he might be unorthodox and he might be a little bit lacking natural ability, but Jesus, talk about reliable and big moments.
You're talking about a man that actually got delisted from Brisbane. Because they thought he wasn't good enough for him, which sort of matches up what you're talking about his particular skills. But one thing that Brisbane didn't give him the opportunity to demonstrate over time is, apart from his skills improving as they do with more experience, is the guy has just got a heart and he's got effort, and what he lacks in terms of skill, he makes up with his just determination. He's running, he's chasing, and just his work rate is just enormous. And so I think it's a lesson for any young lad that's just struggling a little bit. You can lift your game. You can improve it just through sheer effort and just never giving up. And I think he's just an example of it, because, I mean, he tied for our best and fairest last year after being delisted by another AFL club.
I think the other thing too, Brownie, that is probably a little underrated in his game is that, I mean, he's a midfielder. He's been a midfielder his whole career, and he's turned into a hard-running high half forward. But he's also a fantastic opportunist, and the way he operates around forward half stoppage and runs those little lanes and all the rest of it, he's just as much an opportunist as Isaac Ratkin in many respects.
Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. No, he's and his conversion, like some of his goals are not pretty, but his conversion rate is exceptional. He's probably not quite up there with Rochelle this year, but he wouldn't be far behind. And yeah, whether it's on the move, getting the ball, or those clever soccers that he does every now and then, or taking a mark, he can do it all. Yeah, I think we say he's underrated, but the commentators are starting to talk about him a fair bit now, and they're even talking about him to say if you wanted to pick a guy to play in a grand final, he'd be up there as any of the small forwards in the competition, they said this year. So,
and yet not mentioned in the mid-season All-Australian squad. Like, how could you not have Ben Keys in that squad? The only bloke in that from Adelaide that's mentioned is Dawson. How could you not have Keys in that squad? How could you not talk about Mark Keane or Josh Worrell in that squad? Like, blows my mind. But Benny Keys in particular. Any team in the comp would want to have Ben Keys in their forward line at the moment, in my opinion, big man.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah. To be honest, I'm not sure there's a player from the Crows in the last 10 to 15 years that I'm more happy to see succeed, just because he's obviously, he was a Queensland boy through and through in their Brisbane academy, and he got turfed out after a few years, and obviously we threw him a lifeline, but he would have thought his career was done, and for him to rock up and look, as much as we've had some, I'm sure all of us haven't loved every single game he's played, particularly in those first couple of years. You can never doubt his effort and his commitment to the club. And now he's become just such a core part of the club, both on and off the field. He's obviously clearly a fantastic person, but also his craft. He works so hard and everything. His goal kicking is not it's not Tex or Darcy Fogarty in front of goal, but he works.
But he doesn't miss many now.
No, he doesn't, and there's a reason. He's the one who's kicking more goals than anyone else at training. He's always working on it, and it's not everything that Keezy does isn't just by chance. It's through hard work, and also look, people say he's not talented, but he has an amazing ability to know where to be, whether that's at stoppage or in the forward line. That's a skill in itself. He's an absolute magnet, and the fact that he's been able to transition his game into the forward line. And still rack up the ball and also have pretty decent numbers in terms of whether it's a goal assist or goals themselves. He's actually become a bit of a weapon, which is something I could never imagine us calling him a bit of a weapon, 2 years ago.
No.
When he was. So I was going to say initially he was struggling in that role initially. I know he had that great game on Sard a few years ago, but there was a time there I'm like, I'm not sure Keezy's great for we need Keezy anymore, but it turns out we did.
Well, that's the thing, because we used him as a defensive forward when he first came forward. And, Mac talks about him getting delisted from Brisbane. Well, when he got turfed out of Adelaide's midfield, that was almost the second delisting in many respects, because he was 1 foot out of the team at that point. And they probably just kept him in, A, because of our lack of talent, but also B, because of his work rate. And they put him in as a defensive forward, and I don't think that really suited him, because the way he works over his opponents is by just running them off their feet. And now that he's worked out how to play with Neil Bullen, because I think there was a little period there where he didn't quite really understand what his role is, or what his role was, I should say. But now that he's got that sorted and he's running hard up and back, and getting to the feet of contests and providing options over the back when the ball's on transition. Well, I agree with you, big man. He's an absolute weapon, and any team would want to have him in their forward line, in my opinion. Probably between him and Jamie Elliott for the two most damaging high half forwards in the comp, I would say, at the moment.
Yep.
The other one I wanted to talk about is obviously Geordie, and he did have a quiet game by his standards under a hard tag from Dunkley. But as you pointed out, Mac, still had, and you were right, 11 tackles for the game. Had 18 touches, 4 marks, 11 tackles, 5 inside 50, 4 score involvements, 5 intercepts, and 389 metres gained. But when was the last time you could say that we had a captain that could put the team on his back and pull them over the line, Brownie? We haven't seen that since probably Rashido.
It's Rashido. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. No, he's like high quality, and the fact that he did it in a clutch game gives you a fair bit of confidence if we play finals that he'll be one of those guys that will stand up in a final.
He just took it upon himself, and I heard somewhere, and I didn't hear this directly from Nick's, but I heard someone say that Nick said in one of his post matches that he actually asked the players what they needed or what they wanted to do at 3/4 time, and it was the players that said they wanted to open the game up and attack, which seems bloody obvious to me when you're 3 goals down, but whatever.
I was just
No, what else are you going to do? But by the same token, yeah, we'll just chip away and lose by 20. Thanks, coach. But the fact that they did change, and Dawson, you could see the intent from that first wraparound. In that first passage of play where he wrapped around Laird and kicked the ball forward until he got on the end of it. That was the intent. And he worked Dunkley over in the last, absolutely worked him over. And most of Dawson's marks and inside 50s and score involvements happened in the last quarter. And, Fagan can say Dunkley had the wood on him, but Jordan Dawson won us the game. So, stiff shit if he got held for 3/4. Yeah, and that's what good players do. They find a way, right, Mac?
Yeah, exactly. And Dawson is that type of player. He is just so good because he's got so many strings to his bow. And, he's got this amazing capacity when he gets tackled to somehow still get it onto his boot. It's very rare for him to get caught holding the ball. He's just, I think he's the best thing since sliced bread that come to our club. I mean, we didn't just get a player, we got a leader as well. He's just a leader of men because he just sets this huge example. And it was he who actually volunteered to go in the middle. It wasn't a situation of Nix didn't ask him to go in the middle. He asked Nix whether he could go in the middle because he thought our midfield needed a lift and he could do it. I mean, and that's the type of leader he is. And and as the game goes along, you see him at times, if he thinks it's necessary, he'll drift down to the back lines just to put some solidity back there. If he thinks we need a score, you see him drifting up into the forward line. It just reads the game beautifully. And I just think he's one of the best things that ever happened for this club.
He's a ripper, and big man, and if you're going to pick he'd be, he'd be a walk-up start for All Australian. He'd be top 3. He wouldn't get any Brownlow votes for Friday night, probably, yet he was probably the one that won us the game. I don't think so.
I think he might get the 2, because I think Ashcroft probably gets the 3. We know midfielders get all the things, so I couldn't trust them to give Keezy or Shelley any votes, and I think they'll probably give McCluggage 1 or 2 as well. So it's out of. I think Dawson will get at least a vote, maybe 2. Give me 1, and probably gets the 2.
Maybe. But in any event,
look, he's. Yeah, sorry, you're gonna.
No, I was just going to say, he's. You couldn't ask for a better captain.
Well, no, and like, or everyone's different, in terms of their leadership style. Dawson's definitely more of the understated variety. Although I think he's probably grown a bit more extroverted as he's been at the club for a longer period of time. But the most important thing as a captain is that you not only set the example, but you live the example. It's all well and good to say what should happen, but when you got to do it yourself to show others how it's done. And that's what he does. There's basically no element of his game that we could pick holes out and say you don't try hard enough, you don't do enough in this area. Because obviously he's an offensive threat with his kicking and his ball winning and his marking, but his tackling is just as good as anything. He's he lay 13 on the weekend, and he tackles hard. Like there's tackles and there's tackles, and he's one of those that really tackles with intent. They rarely get away from him. So, and obviously, that goal he kicked too, his set shot kicking kicking for goal in general hasn't been great for someone who's such a great field kick most of the time. So for him to absolutely punish that ball and slice it straight through the middle was such a big moment, particularly coming off that grab. And it can't be understated how hard it would be to not only take that grab in the context of the game, but then to finish like he did, to put us in front. Because I've always said, like, when you come from behind, it's not that hard to sort of score multiple goals and make up the margin. But the hardest goal to kick is that one that puts you in front.
Yeah,
you'll find that clubs will obviously often get in a roll, but they just can't get that goal to get in front. But Dawson said, "No, I'm going to do it," and that was a pretty special moment. I think we'll look back on that for the next few years and think that was just as big as that after the siren goal in the showdown.
Yeah, really good summary, big man. Let's talk about a couple of others. We've spoken briefly about Josh Rochelle, but let's spend a little bit more time on him. And he has the 10 touches, and his stats don't really jump out at you to any great extent, although, again, 1 CBA for 1 clearance. Hello?
Oh, yeah, it's unbelievable. Isn't it? I mean, every time he's given an opportunity, Feed, he doesn't disappoint. I mean, I remember going back a couple of weeks ago, I can't remember which game it was. I think he got 3 CBAs. I think he cleared at 2 of them. It's just, and I mean, the guy, he played as a midfielder when he up until he came to the club. So I just don't really get it, why they don't use him more. But I still think, even with the limited game that he had in terms of being used, he had the 10 possessions. He laid 5 tackles and he kicked 3 goals. That's pretty good for a small man who doesn't play as a mid. Pretty good.
Yep. Look, I think he's one of those. Like, if you remember that game, that showdown where Dawson kicked the goal, Rochelle was actually wanting to take that kick. And he'd only played a handful of games at that point, and you thought, geez, he's not shy, wanting to take a kick like that. And I think he's matured now to the extent that he not only wants the ball in his hands at key moments, but you want to give it to him in key moments. That shot that he took from the boundary line, cool as a cucumber, never looked like missing. Another key moment, the ability to get out the back and get on the end of a Keys handball to kick that one in the last. He's got the ability, and look, he's not fantastic defensively, but we're not using him as a defensive forward, and you give him those. You give him a bit of a chop out for those defensive shortcomings, because he would just kill you on the scoreboard if you leave him loose. And Brownie, you and I probably had a few misgivings about him early on, but you wouldn't have him out of your side now, would you?
Oh, hell no. No, he's been clinical with his disposal this year. Last year, that was my biggest problem, was just his kicking efficiency. But even his ground kicking, he's finding targets. But he basically gets a chance within 40 or 50 and he nails it. And that goal that he kicked from 50 on that bloody tight angle, that was on the back of like a great tackle. Like he created that opportunity from nothing. He wouldn't have done that last year. And no, he's been exceptional. I reckon he's if he didn't have a few games out with injury, he'd have to be in the All Australian conversation for sure.
100%.
And also, we it's interesting because you've mentioned his defensive intent, Feed. I mean, he's actually a pretty good tackler. I think if you watch him, he actually really does tackle quite well for someone whose contested game isn't the greatest. It's probably more just sometimes his contest work, in the high ball, or there's just a couple of moments here or there where he'll do something that's probably not the right percentage thing to do.
I think it's more just that he's not a gut runner like Keys or Neil Bullen. He's not got that mindset.
No, but he is someone who knows where to go, and sometimes he does cheat occasionally, but that's actually not the worst thing to do. Steve Johnson was a master at it. It's
100%, and that's a very good example, actually.
Yeah, it's sliding at the back and being the guy that's loose, on the wing or half forward, and then it's not just his goal kicking, but his ability to set up goals too. Like that's 2 or 3 weeks in a row where he's hit an absolute dart to players leading at him inside forward 50. It was Keys on Friday night, Fogarty the week before. He's one of the few. He's one of the few that really lower their eyes going forward, and I just think that he is at the stage now where, I know people we talked about how good Wanganeen Miller is going, and how he's, if everyone redid the draft now, Wanganeen Miller would be ahead of Rochelle. I think we all agree on that, but Rochelle was still a fantastic pick, and one of the things about Rochelle too is he's really the glue of that group. Of that younger group, he's the extroverted one who has sort of brought everyone together, and who leads that younger core, and that stuff's invaluable. So as much as he's obviously becoming a gun on the field, he's also so important to us off the field in terms of the energy of our group, and that's not something we used to be. I think we used to have quite a even in our better years with Pike and such, I think we had quite a introverted group. Apart from Tex and a couple of others, for the most part, they're on the quieter side. But guys like Rochelle, they've sort of brought out this youthful exuberance, and that's not by chance. Like he's a big part of that.
Yeah, I reckon that's a really good point that you raised there, because he gets blokes like Pedler and Nankervis when he's in and stuff like that. But blokes like that, they really do get around him, and he gets around them, and. In the past, we've had a bit of a fractured playing group in terms of seniors and juniors. And the juniors, we've heard stories about them not getting spoken to much by the coach, and the senior players kind of brushing them a bit and all that sort of stuff. So you're right, mate. It's an important piece of the puzzle to have a bloke like Rash that can gel the younger players. That's a really good observation, in my opinion.
And I think that's... So I was going to say that, I don't know Nazaya personally, but he doesn't come across as the type that would be able to be that sort of person for the younger players that Rochelle's been. And look, at the end of the day, Nazaya is an absolute gun and everything like that. But I'm still really happy with Rochelle. I don't think we certainly picked really well, even if he wasn't the best of what was available. He's pretty damn close, and I think, I'm more than happy to have him at the club, because I think he's such an important part of us going forward. And the fact that he's on-field stuff now, he's delivering week in, week out now, which we weren't seeing, we weren't seeing that consistency in the last few years. So I think we'd all be pretty stoked with how he's going. Yeah.
A couple of mentions for defenders. Josh Worrell, 10 intercept marks, along with his other stats, 516 metres gained. Mitch Hinge with 7 intercepts and 515 metres gained. Particularly when the whips were cracking in the last, I thought Josh Worrell was key. And he's... it makes you wonder what we do once Murray's fit again. I rate Murray head-to-head probably ahead of Jordan Butts, but I don't think Jordan Butts has done anything wrong, Brownie. And what do we do there? Do we break up the band, or does Nick Murray have to force his way back in somehow?
Well, the only risk I think you've got with putting Murray back in straight away is that after he came back from injury, it took 2 or 3 games to find his feet.
Yeah.
So I think I'd be giving him a couple of games in the twos just so his body's moving and he's sort of back in sync. And then I think it comes down to who's the classier player. And I think, unfortunately, for Jordan, I think that, Nick's a classier player and he's a better long-term solution. Like, he's got a leap, he's a reasonable kick. He's just a little bit more versatile than Jordan. And I think for that reason, he's got to come back in. But I wouldn't be rushing him back in because I think he might just need a couple of games just to get himself ready.
Would you say, though, that Butts is a better lockdown defender than Nick Murray, though?
If that's all you're looking for.
Yeah.
If you just want him to shut someone down, he probably is. But I think Murray's just got more strengths to his bow, I think, and can be more creative. And if he's against someone with a bit of a leap, I think he's a better option. But, horses for courses. There's definitely... You can't say that Butts has done a bad job, and where he's been guilty of, burning the ball a bit in previous years, he's been pretty good with his disposal this time that he's been back. He hasn't really burnt the ball, so he's done nothing wrong. So that's a pretty tough call, I think.
Yeah, I think Macca it's going to be hard on. Oh, go on, big man.
No, I was just going to say I'll definitely be waiting. I mean, I don't know when exactly he's due back, but I certainly wouldn't be bringing him in until after the bye, maybe a few weeks after that, because I think Butts he's just doing the job we want. And look, I do prefer Murray, and he does make up for his slight lack of height with that leap. But there's no doubt that it's been nice having Butts' height back there for those real tall gorillas. So, yeah, it's going to be conundrum, but that's a good problem to have. Like, Macca, do you have a personal preference as to which player you'd be playing? Both fully fit, of course.
I think both of you guys are on the same page, and I think I'm on the same page as well. That I think in the long term that Murray at his very best is better than Butts at his very best, and that's not a slight on Butts. It's just how we see it. Murray, I think he's been out for a long time, so obviously you'd be silly to bring him straight back in. I just think, let him play a few in the twos, let him get his confidence up, let him get to the point where he's just bursting at the seams and want to play in the A's. And then when you think he's absolutely ready and absolutely fit, bring him in. And that'll be probably somewhere between the bye and the end of the season. So he'll probably get, like if we're in finals, and I think we will be, he might get half a dozen games, something like that. So... I think it's an improvement. I must touch on Worrell, though. That Fleen mentioned Worrell. Worrell has been outstanding in the last few weeks. I mean, when the real crunch is on and the ball's coming down there, the one man that keeps saving us, I know it was Keane one particular week, but if you go over the season, bloody Worrell, he has developed a great player, I reckon. A really, really great defender. He's so desperate, and he gets some of those hard balls you just don't think he's going to get. And I'm really a great big G for Worrell at the moment, Dean.
Well, I agree, and I think that the key is because Mark Keane's got his faults, and at one stage there in the last quarter when he had a kick out and he's just dancing around in the pocket with a couple of Brisbane blokes around him, like, oh God, what's going to happen here? So he does give you those heart and mouth moments.
He does.
But I think him and Josh have got a really good understanding about who's going to be dropping back and who's going to be pushing up to the contest. They seem to work very well together. And, if it's not Mark Keane dropping back behind the play, it's Josh. And, when you factor in Josh's hilarious white line fever, which cracks me up every time. Because he just hates it. He hates getting beaten, and he hates getting a free against him, and he hates opposition players.
To the Bailey head high.
Yeah.
It's great. It's Nathan Bassett sort of style almost.
Oh well, I mean, you only got to look at the Draper flop last year against Essendon, and I gave Josh a bit of shit when I spoke to him about it, but he just about lost his freaking mind. It was about to punch the umpire, I'm sure of it. But you want that sort of competitiveness in your back half, and you want that sort of passion. And it's probably unfortunate for Geordie Butts because he hasn't done a thing wrong, in my opinion, since he's been back. But you just don't want to break up the partnership between Keane and Worrell, I don't think.
No, and it's somebody a very astute comment in the chat that somebody's made 1990 Crow 2's ways. Worrell and Keane have still only played 40 games. I mean, that's being a baby in terms of a long AFL career. I mean, so they're in the stages of maturing. I mean, I just think there is still better to come from both of them because, the more experience they get and the more hardened they get to play every week under pressure. So, and they're doing a great job now. So you can only think that they get better. So it's a very good point.
Yeah. Now, a few boys in the chat want us to talk about Darcy Fogarty, and I'll probably fold the 3 tools into this conversation, Brownie, if you don't mind. Because I don't think the way we're structured up in the forward line, I don't think it's reasonable or realistic to judge each of our 12 forwards in isolation, because I think it's very much a sum of the parts. And even though Darcy's been relatively quiet, Tex does a couple of infuriating things, and someone's got to tell him to stop fending off because those days are long gone now.
Yeah.
But I think that as a unit, they cause so much problem for the opposition that they're all going to have their day or their moments in games. I don't think you're going to have necessarily a dominant performance by any of the 3. How do you see that?
Yeah, Fogarty was still presenting, but the ball just wasn't getting delivered to him. It took a couple of marks up on the sort of half forward, sort of on the wing. Yeah. He was still running a lot, running good patterns, presenting himself, but the delivery inside 50 was pretty atrocious. There were so many balls that were kicked high where one of our forwards didn't even though we had time to get there, one of our forwards didn't even contest the ball, and the balls were marked by the opposition. So and also you take the conditions into account. I don't think you really judge any of the forwards. I thought Phil Thorpe presented a fair bit. He quite often got his hands to the ball. He couldn't quite grab them early, but then when he warmed up, he took a few marks, and Tex took a few marks. But some of his decision making again was a bit average. But he kicked that one goal, did a few good things, but he's doing a few things that are uncharacteristically silly that he never used to do. But overall, I thought they all presented. That it just wasn't a game where many balls were getting kicked into the forward 50 efficiently.
I think, unfortunately, Tex suffers from what probably all of us here have suffered from at times, where we've got a young man's brain and an old man's body. And the brain's writing checks that the body can't cash anymore.
Yeah, good way of putting it, Sven. I think we're all... I don't know about the others. I'm certainly in that category.
But I think the way we've got our forward line set up now, big man, means that we... opposition teams have got to put work into the 3 of them. But, as much as Tex is probably teetering on the edge of the end of his career, and we saw it when he had that mismatch on Charlie and what's his name?
Levi Ashcroft, was it?
Yeah. If you give him a mismatch, or if you don't put any time into Tex, he'll hurt you. So it's not as if he's useless. So I think it was bold. It was a bold choice for them to play 3 tools in the wet, but I think it worked fine as it turned out.
Yeah, look, it's a tough one with Tex because I think we all agree that as much as he's lost that 5% power in his body that allows him to for those fens to work every time, or the ruck contest is obviously not as good as those anymore, or just in general finding separation, getting that extra little bit of acceleration on the lead and get more space. He's just lost those little things, but we all still know how dangerous he is, and it's not quite happening for him right now. There are a couple of moments where I feel like he's being a bit selfish in terms of going for goal when he probably shouldn't be. Although he did butter up and have a really good team moment later in the game. But yeah, I mean, it is what it is. He's obviously the third fiddle now. It's really Filthy's forward line with and then Fogarty and then Tex. And it's not a worse position to be in. It's something we'll have to address going forward though, because as you said, this probably is Tex's last season. You're pretty surprised if it isn't. But yeah, like I think most of us have hope that he's got a 3 or 4 goal game in the pocket at some point because he's just such a smart forward. Fogg is an interesting one, isn't he? Because there's no doubt that he's being restricted still by that shoulder injury. And not just the way he moves, but I imagine with his preparation and everything, he's not able to do as much training or do what he would preferably like to be able to do. He just doesn't seem to be covering the ground quite as well either. So yeah, he's an interesting one, but it wasn't that long ago against Collingwood, and then this was post injury where he almost won us the game.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's another one where I wouldn't surprise if he has a great game coming up. And as you said, the conditions, it's pretty hard to play for a key forward to kick bags in that rain. So I'm a little bit concerned about Fogg, but as we know, when he's got the ball in his hands, he either makes goals or he kicks them. So until he really his form really dries up, I'm not going to be too concerned.
Well, I think that one of the issues with that is the fact that, and I think it's something they need to look at. Tex is such a big presence, and he's been such a big presence in the club and in the team for such a long time that when he plays, he still draws a lot of the ball to him. And I think there was a stat someone chucked up the other day where Tex is still having 40% of ball directed towards him, and Fogg is only having about 20-25% of the ball directed towards him. And you'd like to see that flip, to be honest with you. And I don't know how they manufacture it, because I think it's I think Darcy has just always deferred to Tex. It's just the role that he's played ever since he's been in the side. But that needs to flip pretty quickly because we need Darcy to be more of a focal point in tandem with Thilthorpe, and for Tex to be that third tall decoy, loose sort of player, and also better for Tex because he gets a third defender then.
Yeah, I reckon though the big man had got a good point about his shoulder. I mean, that was a hell of a blow that he took, and just when you also chuck in the fact of the conditions that he was playing in on the weekend, it really wasn't a game for forwards of that size. I mean, Thilthorpe's just a freak here, where he can do things that others can't. But like the Walkers and the Fogartys, that's not their natural conditions, and it is hard, and it's very much in favour of the defenders. And look, I've got no doubt that if we get some nice dry day and we're playing and we're getting the ball in the forward line correctly, Fogg will still shine. He'll have days where he'll still kick 4 or 5.
Well, I think it's a good point that you make, Mac, that, finals are played on the G, and having 2 lead-ups like Tex and Fogg on that big wide ground isn't a bad thing. So, that being said, I think there's still this propensity to want to get Tex to 300 games, and I'm not a fan of that at all. Brownie, are you?
I don't think it matters whether I'm a fan. It's going to happen. But, I mean, at the moment, he's doing just enough to justify a spot in the team, and he's always going to take a key defender and all that kind of gear. But I do agree in terms of Fogarty, he's costing Fogarty, opportunity to get the ball because they clearly look for Tex first and Fogarty second, and quite often Fogg makes really good leads and gets ignored. So I think it'll be I'm not worried about Fogg's form at all. I think he's still like making his presence felt. He's still tackling. He's still doing all the right things. And I think next year when Tex isn't around, I think you'll see he'll probably take another step forward. But in terms of Tex, I think they've made their mind up. He's playing 300. So if he's playing 300, he's either playing every game until the finals or they're going to rest him, and he's definitely going to be playing finals. So I think we've just got to work a way to make it happen. And as long as he's getting a goal or two every game and competing, then I haven't got a problem with it.
And Brownie, like, who do you bring in? Like
that's the thing. There's not really an option.
Yeah, and unless we play a too tall forward line, and Fogg's not the tallest guy himself, so it's really just Thilthorpe and Fogg's more in the mid-size, even though he plays reasonably tall. It does feel looks us leaving a bit leaves us looking a bit short. Who's next? Burgess? Like, I don't think we want to go down that track again. No, and Toby Murray, he would have been good, but he's obviously injured for weeks still, and Curtin, right. We could have a future as a forward, but right now he's actually playing really solid footy as a wing, and I don't think we want to upset that. So I think it's just we don't really have anyone else, unless I'm forgetting someone that could really probably play that role. No. That would be as happy as Tex, to be honest, because I don't think the alternatives are really there.
Well, we'd have to change our configuration.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's a problem for next year. If he retires at the end of the year, like we all think he will, we've got plenty of time to find a replacement or work a different configuration. But yeah, I think he's here for the rest of the year, so hopefully it'll work.
Yeah, look, obviously if he retires, we wouldn't be replacing him, I don't think, with another tall. I don't think. You think you're probably looking for another small round there, just looking for more crumbs. But and somebody said it's Curtin in the chat. I really like the way Curtin's developing on the wing at the moment. I think if you look at his last 2 games, I just think the guy's growing. He's definitely growing as a player, and his confidence. You got a bloke that's 197 centimetres tall. He's mobile. He's got a reasonable amount of pace now. He's developed his speed a bit. He takes very good overhead marks. He's a lovely kick, very deliberate kick. In the chat, Vardy Magic says leave him where he is, and I'm a big believer in that. The guy is growing, and often when we're coming out of defence, he's starting to be a go-to player. So I like the way he's developing where he is.
Someone said Cook, and look, Cookie in some ways is probably the most like for like in terms of his mercurial around goal and his skill set, but he just doesn't have the contest, and unless that improves, I just don't see them going down that track.
Agreed.
Ben?
Oh, do you want me to talk? All right.
Sorry, I think I took over hosting duties for a couple minutes there. So
that's all right. I'm just messing around with my camera because it froze. So, all right. So, for God's sake, who else can we quickly talk about? There was someone else here. So we'll talk about ins and outs in a little while when we get to next week. The last one I just wanted to touch on was Luke Pedlar. Didn't get a lot of it. Didn't get as much of it as last week. But does anyone agree with me that I just love the hardness that he brings to the forward 50 and the fact that he barrels in, and I'd like him to get on the end of a few. He was sort of running into position a few times and didn't get on the end of stuff. But I think he's a keep and hold at the moment, don't you, Brownie?
It's a bit interesting.
Macca, someone, anyone?
Yeah, but no, what I was going to say, it'd be interesting to know what they expect of him. Firstly, because the way he's playing at the moment is he's not playing as a lead-up player. He's not playing as a main man. He's playing the role of, well, you've got 3 bigs there. If there's any crumbs coming around, I'll have a crack at them. And he only got the 3 possessions, but he did also get 6 tackles, which holds the ball in the area. So somebody says Arab says, and he's a pressure forward, and that's the way he's playing at the moment. And look, I think that he complements the big tools quite well, actually, because often when the tools miss it, say the tools don't mark the ball, it's a lot easier for the ball to be cleared. But if you've got a bloke like Pedlar whose role is there to keep the ball there, I mean, get it if he can, but to keep it. As a pressure, his tackling is insane. It's really when he tackles, they tackle. So Look, I think it's certainly worth persevering with because I've only had three disposals. I think he kicked a goal, didn't he? If I remember rightly, he did. But he also kept the ball in the area like 6 times with very good tackles. So, it's not his natural role. It's not, but I do think that he's good enough to do it. So I'm quite happy with him there at the moment.
Brownie,
I
big man. Just ignore my
Sorry.
bloody segues. Just go ahead and
Sorry.
bloody work it out yourself.
there's a gap there where I'm like, oh, should I get in? And then obviously I stuff it up. So sorry about that. I'm trying to read your mind, theme, but I think I got that one wrong.
No, you don't want to be doing that. Jesus.
No, bad things in there.
That's impossible, mate.
Dark place.
I was going to say, I think he's, if his role as a pressure forward was a difference in terms of his aerial ability, which we didn't really see on the weekend, but we've seen in the past.
He's going to take a hang on one day.
Yeah, I think there's a spot for him at the moment for sure. And I think it's not exactly just because he's in the team, but we've won the last 3 games we've played, and I'm sure that helps his case as well. But there's a couple of things about his game that still worry me, like just some of his fumbling, and I feel like it might be just me, but I feel like with all the injuries he's had, he's lost a little bit of his pace. It feels like, there was that, he might have just been cooked, but there was that one where he almost got chased down by Fletcher in the goal square when he kicked that goal. I thought, a few years ago, because this guy ran a sub 3-second 20-meter sprint. And I said, I feel like he just lacked a little bit of his explosiveness that he's had, and maybe that's conditioning, or maybe that's the amount of injuries and soft tissue injuries particularly he's had. I'm hoping he can regain some of that speed back because his kamikaze style suits that, and the more speed in the team the better. But I think we're seeing just enough from him, and unless he puts an absolute stinker in, I'm definitely persevere for the next few weeks at least.
Big man, did you say Big Man? I think Big Man said that he's run a 3-minute 100. What did you say?
Did I three? I said I thought I said under 3 second. Did I say under 3 minute?
3 minutes.
Seconds,
Oh,
no, you said 3 seconds.
That's.
Oh, did he? I'm sorry.
I was going to say that's more Matt Crouch territory, but
apologies, mate. I heard it as 3 minutes. But that's why I reacted. So sorry about that.
That's right.
I think too, Brownie, he might be suffering a bit from the old playing for your life syndrome and a bit afraid to make mistakes. There was one situation in the last where him and Ben Keys both ended up looking at each other because neither of them went for a mark that they could have gone for, and I think Peds is at the moment still in that playing for his life mindset, and I hope that they give him a good run so that he gets a bit more confidence and feels like he belongs in the team and has a role, because we've seen what that sort of mindset has done to a few other players over the journey.
Yeah, you're right. I hope they do give him the confidence that he's got 3 or 4 games. I mean, you don't want him putting in a 3 disposal performance regularly, but the thing I like about him is I like his disposal in front of goal. I think he's a pretty good finisher. But the thing I love about him most is his hard edge, and I think he reminds me of Gary McIntosh without the skill.
Yeah,
he's just hard as nails. You don't want him to run through you, and he's just that kind of thing. He can do things that'll just get the team up in the big games at key moments. So I'm hoping he can stay sound, and I think as his confidence grows, if they keep him in the side, I think his disposal numbers will increase. But I think I was a bit worried about him, but I've seen enough in the last few weeks that I think we need to persevere for sure.
All right. Well, I reckon we've just about summed it up, unless one of you guys has something else you wanted to cover before we close up.
Oh. Just trying to think of all the players in the team. I think that's. I mean, just as a quick one, how are we feeling about the half-back group as it is? Because it's since basically Nankervis has moved out of the team, it's been pretty consistently Hinge, Laird, Miller, and Smith as a sub, or not as a sub. Do we want change in that regard? Are we happy with how they're all going? I mean, I thought Miller was actually pretty decent on the weekend without starring, but I thought his contest work and his aerial stuff was an improvement in what we're seeing.
I agree, and I also thought it was possibly Laird's best game of the year too. So, look, at the moment, just leave it as it is. I would think.
Ben, do you have any thoughts? Or Brandon?
Yeah, well, I reckon.
Hang on. Just hang on. Let me just address something.
I've done it again.
Big man. Until you show your face on the video, you're not allowed to host, right? So, back in the box.
I don't know what's wrong with me, mate. Yeah.
Brownie?
Nah,
Competition is good. What are we talking about? Miller?
Just a halfback. Are you happy with the halfback?
Well, I think we're going to leave it the same. The only question is, do you roll the dice and have Brodie as a sub again? Like, how many halfback flankers do you need in your 22? It worked this week. It worked really well. But if someone goes down in the forward line or in the midfield, then you're going to be struggling for rotations because you're going to have to push Miller or Laird or somewhere into another position. It's not really going to work. So
that's true.
Yeah.
I will say that I thought not dropping, but subbing Butts and putting Smith on was actually a good call. Not that Geordie was playing bad, but because of the conditions and the way the game, we needed a bit more run.
Well, Rayner was going to be the danger, so it was a good call.
Yeah,
definitely a good call.
I think in general, our sub use of the sub this year has been better than we've seen in the years past. It hasn't certainly been Tom Lynch
disagree with that.
Launceston days. Do you agree? Really? With the use of the subbing game, I mean?
Well, I just don't think. I mean, we've had Sid in there for 100 games, and I don't think it's done him any good. I don't think we should lose sight of the fact that whilst I don't think Brodie Smith has done much wrong since he's been in, and I think he's done what's been asked of him, I don't think we should lose sight of the fact that Charlie Edwards could be 6 games into a AFL career now. And I think
good point.
I think that I think that's going to be key going forward. And someone in the chat asked, "Are we happy to play for the now instead of the future?" Well, obviously we're in the hunt this year to at least make a good showing in the finals. So we have to play to a degree for now. But I don't think we would have lost much by having Charlie in against West Coast and Sydney, and to kept him in for a game like last Friday night would have been a fantastic experience for him, even if it would have been as a sub. And so I'm glad that Laird and Smith, for the most part, are doing their job and playing their roles, but I would still have preferred to have had Charlie Edwards in 6 weeks ago.
No, I actually agree, Fang. As much as and look, Smithy's actually done nothing wrong really since he's come into the team, and he's definitely playing at a higher level than he was last year, but he's still not the Smithy of 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So I look at Charlie on the weekend, and that was a horrible game. It was a great comeback win in Noarlunga, but there's enough there for me to think that we don't lose anything by playing Charlie over Smith.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't see what Smith. I don't see what Charlie would be able to put out there that Smithy can actually outperform as it is. Now Laird's a slightly different case because he's got a couple more things and he was suited to the conditions that that ground ball was suited with the rain on Friday night. But
but how good would it have been to have 5 or 6 games into Hugh Bond now, and having him be that rock hard small defender who can lock down on a small forward and also be that outlet. Like, that's what we want Hugh Bond to be. And again, short-term pain for long-term game in that regard, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think there's a room for debate with Laird, but I definitely agree with you on Smith that there's nothing against Smithy. I think he's doing fine. It's just that Charlie would be able to offer just as much, and he's 12, 13 years younger. Like, just go down that route.
That would be a good move. Yeah, I agree with that. Good move.
Yeah. Just briefly on that SANFL game, Charlie had another good game. What do you think of Sid Draper, big man in the SANFL?
I think that he's still learning his craft, and that, you know, it's easy to think that he's a pick 4, a midfielder. He's ready to go, and in some ways he is, but in some ways he's not, if that makes sense, because he's got elements to his game that will hold up at AFL level if you put him in there right now. He's a great worker. He's obviously super quick and agile. So when he gets the ball in his hands, he's pretty excited to watch, and he's a very good contested stoppage player. But he still needs to work out his gears a little bit. He's a bit frenetic still at the moment, and I think that's just a matter of we need to acclimatise him to a standard of footy right now, whether that's SANFL or AFL, where he feels comfortable and he can learn the pace of the game. And I think he needs to just use his legs more. And I love when he puts the jets on, but sometimes he's too handball happy, or he rushes himself with his disposal by foot. So just need to iron out some kinks there. But you can't deny the things he does offer. And that goal he kicked, which was the one that put us almost in front. I think it got us to within a point or so.
Yeah.
That was a really good goal. You know, he was just too quick for his opponent, and he was really really classy with that snap. So he's showing signs of someone that's, you know, just needs a bit more polish before I think he's ready to play consistent AFL footy. Having said that, I wouldn't be surprised if he's in the AFL team this week because Peatling's out. So I'll be interested to see what they do there, because I think that's definitely up for debate as for what's best for Sid and his development.
Well, I remember Brownie, a player a little while back that lacked composure, and his disposal was a bit all over the place, and he was a bit of a raw talent, and he ended up winning a Brownlow medal. Did Patrick Dangerfield?
Yeah, there's definitely a comparison between the two. I think it's hard with Sid because he's been, as you say, 5 times as the sub. It's been messing with his confidence, and probably hasn't been getting enough game time. So
game time.
It's hard to judge. But the only way we find out is by, we've still got 10 games to go. I don't think we can afford to give up on playing him. So if he had a good game in the twos on the weekend, then Peatling's out. He's the perfect replacement. Look, there's no one that's more qualified to do it, and I think it'd be a great opportunity.
Yeah, I just, you know, I'm always one for saying that we're, you know, this season we're unexpectedly high on the table. You know, it looks like we're going to feature heavily in finals, and yet I still feel like we're at the tail end of our rebuild, and
we are.
When you see blokes like Laird and Smith running through it, and Tex labouring to 300, and Matt Crouch getting looking and blah de blah. I understand that we still need some experience. I think we've got a bit of better experience in there now with Dawson and Neil Bullen and those blokes. But, you know, what we're missing out on is giving the next tier AFL experience. And so they're going to be starting their careers next year, potentially. And it might just prolong our rebuild another year, when I think in 26 we should definitely be contending from 26 onwards. So, you know, they've decided to go this way, and we know Matthew Nicks doesn't really trust the youngsters terribly much, and has his favourites and likes his experience and his continuity. I just hope that we don't stifle a few blokes in the process.
So who would you bring in this week, Dean?
All right, well, before we talk about this week, let's just get through your 5 minutes of fame, Macca, because I'd hate to deprive you, of course, and then we can talk about next week's game. So, bit of a mixed bag this week. Bulldogs went down to Hawthorn. I was a bit surprised by that, 8-11-59 to 12-9-81.
Well, it was a bit of a surprise. It was a bit of an upset. The Hawks they'd lost 3 games in a row before this game, but they just led from go to woe, and they really just were too good. Meek dominated in the ruck. Newcomb was really good on the ball. And Weddle was very exciting down back. He's a player of the future. And look, it's a very costly loss for the Dogs because they dropped out of the 8. But on the night, the Hawks were just too good.
Yeah, well, the Dogs are actually quite similar to us in terms of who they've played. And whilst we have, ticked a box in terms of the challenge against Brisbane, the Bulldogs failed theirs against Hawthorn, and it's dropped them right back into the pack. So there you go. The Swans getting up over Richmond and, I'd say finding a bit of form, but restoring probably a little bit of respectability. 11-14-80 to 4-12-36.
Yeah, look, it looked like it was going to be a good game, and it was a very good competitive first quarter, and the Tigers were actually a goal in front at quarter time. That's where it started and ended. City just got on top of the last 3 quarters, and they kicked 9-10 to 1-8 after that. Grundy was good in the ruck. Blakey, he's exciting when he's going, and he was generating a run with 34 dispersal from the back lines. Just too good.
Yep. A pretty dour sort of a match, and I didn't think the Suns played too badly, but the Cats getting up 9-7-61 to 5-7-37. Talk about the game, and then let's just spend a moment talking about that Tom Stewart bump.
All right. Well, look, no Bailey Smith, no problems. Max Holmes steps up. He takes over that running role, and he has 40 disposals. And he is a bloody good player, Max Holmes.
He's a beauty. Holmes, yeah.
Yeah, goals were very, very scarce due to wet conditions, but the Cats just that little bit cleaner with the ball and the disposal, and they know how to play that horrible skinny oval. And Gold Coast still have not won a game at Alphabet Oval. It's a horrible ground.
No, they're no orphans. The fact that they redeveloped it and kept that stupid potato shape is ridiculous. They should have sorted that out. It
is.
I mean, we widened Adelaide over when we redeveloped it. They should have done the same. Anyway, all right, the Tom Stewart bump. I won't say what I think just yet. I'll go around the room, though. Mac?
Well, when it happened at first, I thought, well, he's going to get a match here. But when I look at where from the back view, where you get a clear view of what he did hit, he didn't actually hit the player in the head. But he hit him with such force that he went down and hit his head hard. Now, I don't know whether you can actually penalise a player for that because, I mean, the bump was legal. And if you start to penalise a player for the result of the bump when it's actually legal and you've only done what's legal, surely you can't get penalised. And that's the way I look at it.
Big man.
Well, yeah, it's one of those ones where it was just it was a bump that finished nastily. But if we penalise players for bumps that end badly but didn't start badly, then I think we're getting to a bad situation. Because
can we do that
once
with
you bump
Shane McAdam?
Well, we did. I mean, I think they still seem to maintain that there was some sort of high contact or whatever, but there wasn't. But that was their sticking point that they're. Apparently, I mean, it did look high, but then when you watch it again, it probably wasn't. I still don't understand what that whole situation is about. I think he was just a scapegoat. I'm curious to see if that was done now. I'm not sure it'd be the same result. There's actually a more interesting one not more interesting because I think it's less debatable, but there was one tonight with Sam Durham on Adam Chera. So Chera went off with a head injury assessment eventually. That was another story because he took ages to come off, like 10 minutes. So that was dodgy as it was. But that one, he didn't get concussed either in the end, but I don't see how Durham doesn't go. That was a pretty nasty one. So, but as for the Stewart one, I think it's just unfortunate, the result of it, but I don't think it was, I couldn't imagine penalising a player for that.
Brownie?
Yeah, I don't even think it's a discussion. It was a perfect bump and he didn't contact the head. So I don't think there's just no grounds for reporting him.
Any query about him running past the ball to take the player out?
You don't do that,
bump. Yeah, bump. That's not an issue with a bump. A bump, as long as the ball's within 5 metres, you're allowed to bump.
Yeah.
So there's no issue there.
All right. Very good. That's pretty much how I feel about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. If we were going to penalise that, then we might as well take the bump out, make it a non-contact sport.
Start wearing skirts.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that would be easier. Less impact for some than others.
Oh, we look back on Sloaney's bump on Dangerfield in the prelim.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
we think what a great moment, but do we want to penalise that too, or?
Yeah.
So, no.
That was a good. That was a ripper.
I mean, that's an iconic. That's an iconic moment in AFL football. Why would you want to outlaw that?
Isn't it? Oh, I loved it.
One of the loudest crowds I've ever been to at any stadium.
Yeah,
night.
yeah.
It was buzzing. It was crazy. Let's not talk about that the week after though.
No. And we had the Power. The Giants are flaky as hell at the moment. The Power getting up 9-12-66. The Giants 7-8-50 in Canberra.
Well, I shouldn't be playing in Canberra. I don't think it's just too cold. Oh,
what?
Don't like it. Anyhow,
what are you talking about?
Look, man, well, it's always cold and wet down there.
It's cold and wet in Tasmania as well. You're not going to play there either?
Yeah. No, I wouldn't. It's my choice.
Not without a roof.
Not without a roof, yeah. No, I thought it was a horrible error-ridden game to watch. I thought it was a shocker to watch. And Port just made less errors than GWS. But they were virtually without Green because he got somebody went for a flyer and got a great big knee in his glute from the rear. And he was virtually paralysed. He could barely walk, the poor bugger. So, and he'll be sore even right now. It would hurt like hell. So, they did have to operate without Green. I think that was costly, but it was a terrible, terrible game to watch. Rosie and Butters, they were very good. They actually probably the highlights of the game. And Farron Bergman, not too bad either. But the GWS guns, they just only went pop. So, no good.
Now that... I don't know whether I'm giving Butters too much credit here, but that free kick that Ollie Wines got towards the end for being obstructed in the ruck contest, he pointed to Butters after that. And I have a feeling that Butters told him to nominate for the ruck because he was getting blanketed. Because even though the Port ruckman was there. And I reckon it was actually really smart by Butters to get the free because
it was very smart, really smart. Because as you said, the ruckman's standing there, but Butters, obviously told him to nominate yourself, and of course the forward GWS player didn't know, and when he took the ball, he just tackled him. It was a free. But it was clever. It was
very good. Anyway, and then today we had a pretty average game between North and the Eagles. 9-8-62 North to the Eagles 6-16-52.
Yeah, the clash of the cellar dwellers and the standard of the game reflected that. In fact, the Eagles dominated the first three quarters, but they only led by 11 points because they're kicking, 5-14 or 5-3 at three-quarter time. And, North Melbourne are a better side, and they're always going to have a good quarter. They had the last quarter, and they ran over in the last quarter. Zeri was dominating the ruck. Sheasel getting the heaps of the ball, and they kicked the last 4 goals of the game and got up to win. So, West Coast, if they'd kicked straight into the first 3 quarters, could have won the game. They didn't, so they didn't.
Correct. Bad kicking, bad football. And then Carlton nearly fluffing their lines against Essendon. I thought I watched the first quarter and Carlton were all over, and then I walked away and saw the halftime score and noticed that it was back to 20 odd points, and I thought, wouldn't mind betting Essendon run over the top of them here, and they nearly did, but Carlton held on by 8 points in the end.
Yeah, look, I don't think either of those two are very. Well, they're not the top level of teams, are they? I mean, Carlton are definitely overrated team, much overrated, and I could see the game in the background without any sound on. But they did dominate early. Carlton did, but in their usual way, they allowed Essendon to get back into the game, and if Essendon had just a little bit more talent, they would have taken it away. But they made a couple of errors at the crucial stage, and in the end, Carlton got up by 8 points.
Very good. Thank you, Macca. That was exhilarating as always. We'll just have a look.
Of course. It goes without saying, mate.
We'll just have a look at the table. And I've cut half of it off here. Sorry about that. Collingwood's still in front with a game in hand on 40 points. Obviously, they're playing Melbourne tomorrow. A chance to go a game and a half clear at the top of the table if they win. Brisbane on 38, Adelaide now on 36. The Cats also on 36. Gold Coast with a game in hand on 32, so you'd expect them also to be on 36 because it's Essendon that they've got to play. Hawthorn on 32, a game back. The Giants and Fremantle on 28. Obviously, Fremantle also the bye this week. Then out of the 8, we have the Bulldogs on 24, Essendon on 24, Carlton on 20, along with St Kilda, Sydney, Melbourne and Port. North on 14, Richmond on 12, and the Weagles still on 4 points. So we can't. I don't think we'd have to do something ridiculous to miss the finals at this point. So, like the first achievement that we have set out to achieve this year, we have achieved before the bye, and I don't think that can be understated, Brownie.
And what's that, to be in the 8?
To have achieved, like, basically locking in a finals spot by the bye, because there's no way we can drop out now.
Yeah, you're probably right. The only team I think that's out of the 8 that could potentially replace the team in the 8 is the Bulldogs, because I don't think Carlton and Essendon have got enough talent. If the Bulldogs get on a real run, they could. Yeah, for us to drop out, we'd have to. We could probably drop 5 games from here and still make the 8.
Correct.
So yeah, we've just
and
got to win our home games, really.
We've got a decent run in the back half of the year, so I think like mathematically, obviously we can miss, but I think we've ticked the first box, which is to make the 8, and we've done it by the bye. Yep. So I mean that's overachieving as far as I'm concerned. It
is. Yeah, the focus now has got to be on top 4 for sure.
Yep. So we've got Hawthorn in Tasmania at UTAS Stadium next Friday night, another Friday night game. We've just had the weather report from Four Eyes Billy, who lives in Tassie, saying that it's a balmy 10 in Lonnie and 3 or 4 in Hobart. Where's UTAS? Is that in Hobart? Lonnie, is it? So potentially it could be a little bit warmer than Hobart. So I don't know why they want a roof on their bloody stadium, for God's sakes. Obviously, I think, like we said at the beginning of this little 3-game stretch, that winning 2 out of the 3 would have been a pass. Winning 3 out of the 3 and the lid's off. And on form, you'd have to say that we're a massive chance against Hawthorn down there, Mac.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a hard game to win, though, mate. It is going to be a hard game to win. I don't think Hawthorn are your orthodox side. The other teams are orthodox in the sense of the way they structure. Hawthorn don't rely on key position players as much as other teams do. They like to swarm, and mid-sized players just getting a lot of the ball and moving around and just swarming straight at you. And really, they're relying mainly on Chol, who I think is stoppable. But at the moment, he's playing much better than I thought he was capable of doing on a consistent basis.
I don't think he's that good at all, Mac, to be honest with you.
No, I'm saying, but at the moment he is playing well, which I'm surprised at.
You reckon?
He's playing above what I thought he played pretty well on the weekend.
First time for a while. Anyway, go on.
Yeah, and I know the Hawks had lost 3 games before that, but I thought they did play well to win that particular game. I think we can win it, but it's going to take our very best to do it. And I wouldn't be thinking it would be by a big margin. I'm thinking if we got in by 11 points, I'd be happy.
What about 10 points? Not happy?
Look, I'm happy we win by 1, but that's my tip. That's the margin I'm tipping, mate. 11 points.
Right. Brownie?
Yeah, I'm certainly a bit more worried about this one. I think Hawthorn played Tassie really well. They towered us last year, and I think their pace was evident. Like they were just really quick. They were moving the ball. I think we've got a bit more pace in our team this year, and I think we match up a little bit better this year. So I'm hoping, if it's a dry day, I'm hoping we'll be more competitive. But I think it'll be a tough one over there. I'd probably, I'd love us to win. I think we could go down by maybe a couple of goals.
Big man, is the lid off if we make it 3 from 3 before the bye?
I actually think so. I think so. And I think that because I think that going into this little 3-game stretch, obviously I think we expected Sydney to be better than they offered up.
Correct.
So that game's almost a 2-game stretch, really, the way it went down. But I was always going to be really happy with 2. I would have accepted 1, but being disappointed at the same time, and I would have been ecstatic with 3. And this always seemed like the hardest of the 3 games, not because Hawthorn are a better team than Brisbane. I think Brisbane are the better team, but just because the Brisbane game is at home and this one's at Tassie, and we don't seem to match up. We haven't seemed to match up well against Hawthorn the last few times we've played them. I think both games last year were blowouts. And I know we're a better team this year, and they're probably not going quite as well, but they refound some form and mojo against the Dogs the other night. So, yeah, I mean, it's funny. I'm going to tip against this again, but the last 2 weeks I've tipped against this and been wrong. So maybe I'm got the opposite of the Midas touch or whatever you want to call it, and that if I keep tipping against this, we'll keep winning. So, but I actually think we'll lose this week. And I'm going to tip against this, if that makes sense.
The anti-Midas. I reckon there's a lot of Richmond under Hardwick about Hawthorn. The way they go about it, a bit of a mosquito fleet around the place and a couple of decent tools. But I think we're playing differently. As we spoke about at the top of the show, I think we're playing... I think in previous years we would have gone head-to-head with them and tried to get our transition game going and all that sort of stuff. I think this way that we're playing at the moment it'll be interesting to see A, if they persist with it against Hawthorn, and B, whether it's effective against a team like Hawthorn who do like to flick it around. They're very hard at it. Their pressure ratings are good when they're playing well, and they have some very crafty small and mid-sized players. So do they have the defence to stop our forward line? Probably not, I don't reckon. Do they have a forward line to kick a winning score against our defence? Maybe. So I think it'll be very much about how we can contain, not so much in terms of the numbers their midfield, but in terms of their effectiveness, and not allow them to get too much corridor and too much free use. And if we can do that, I think we're in with a sneaky. And we've knocked off a couple of milestones this year, Brownie, and knocking off Hawthorn in Tasmania would be another one. And that's the sort of season we seem to be having at the moment.
You sound like you're half confident.
No, I'm fully confident. We win by 4 goals down there.
Oh, God. Okay.
Yay.
Yeah.
Big.
No,
It could happen.
I think we actually, the way we're playing at the moment, the style of play that we're playing at the moment actually works really well against that sort of a team, and I don't think they've got the cattle to hold us up forward. It might be a little bit windy, but I don't think it's going to be wet down there according to the... Arab, I've only had one drink. No, I just don't think... I don't think they're going to be able to hold us to a losing score. That's my point of view.
It will be a direct contrast of 2 different styles, I think, won't it? I mean, the way our game plan is and our style, and with tools, etc., up forward, and tight defence and all that sort of stuff, they've just got this mosquito fleet all around the ground with just an odd tool here and there, and they're a dangerous side if once they get running. They really are.
Yeah, just like Richmond were in their day.
Yeah, and it's really mosquito fleety type stuff, and with the, as I say, with the odd big tool here and there, and that is the real danger if they get onto one of those rocks where the ball bounces their way and they get started well. That's going to be the danger if they really start like that. It's going to be hard for them to stop them. The times they've been beaten is when right for the first bounce they've been sort of been covered and they can't just get it going, because then they don't have those elite tools anywhere really. I mean, Meek is a good ruckman and a good plays well, and they've got one or two, but not as many as other teams. They just rely on pace and movement, clever movement, all that sort of stuff. So. I think the first quarter is going to be crucial. If we can sort of get on top early, and I think our style will prevail and we'll win the game. But if they sort of get that run going, well, it's going to be hard for us to pull it back. I do agree with that.
Yeah, and that's probably the key. We need to see the energy that we've seen over the last couple of weeks. It's been noticeable to me that the energy levels have been up and the blokes are getting around each other and celebrating the tackles and the smothers and all that sort of the little things, the 1%ers. So they're going to need to bring that down there. So they're going to have to obviously play their best. But I just think that we are. Well, I think on paper we're actually a better side than Hawthorn.
I agree with that. Totally agree.
Their midfield is awesome. Their midfield's definitely. I was going to say their midfield without Day is definitely on the workman side of things.
I mean, we don't have Peatling, so that probably cancels that out to a degree. But you're right. I don't think they've got the best midfield going around. Newcomb and that they're just. I mean, they work bloody hard, and I've got a lot of time for them, but they're not silky by any stretch.
Yeah. No, they're good tradesmen. That's what they are.
Yeah. Day's their superstar, but he's not obviously there.
Yeah. Tones in the chat says Nix v Mitchell. I'd say it's probably Davis v Mitchell.
Yeah. I think it will be. Hopefully. Because if it was Nix versus Mitchell, we're down. We've lost the game. If it was on that.
Well, has anyone noticed a shift in Matthew Nix's demeanour over the last 3 or 4 weeks? I've noticed, like he said a couple of things, like I'm doing less. I asked the players.
He did
Jack
say
Hodge
that.
has been great. And whenever they pan to the coach's box, Murray Davis is like sitting like a little parrot on his shoulder with lots of side eye looking over to see what Nixies is doing. And I don't actually know. I'm not a body reading expert, but I just get the impression that Nix is a bit flat.
I think that he's getting a little bit of not necessarily on match day, but through the course of the week, I think he's getting a bit of coaching from Murray.
Yeah, and I don't think he likes it.
No, I don't think he likes it either, but I think he's getting it.
Because let's not forget, Brownie, when he came in, he didn't want any help. Matthew Nix, he didn't want any help. First year coach didn't want any help.
Yeah,
and that's probably still the case. It's probably being forced on him a bit, but at the end of the day, the fact that we're winning, you think he'd be maybe having a look in the mirror and saying, is maybe, getting some input from other people a good thing? Well, and getting someone with that much experience on his side has got to be a good thing. So I'm hoping in the long term he'll embrace it.
I mean, the one thing that we do know is that Matthew Nix didn't ask for help. That was as a result of Tim Silver's review after last season, and Murray Davis was headhunted as a result of that. The other thing I thought that was interesting over the last couple of days is John Olsen, when asked about an extension for Matthew Nix, was very cool on the idea and was very very forthright in saying that there were some KPIs that needed to be met. So, which is far more measured than 18 months ago. So
100%, Fan, you're on the money. I think you're right on the money there, and I think he has been set targets, and I think he's been set ways of doing things. I think that Murray Davis is really he was brought there to exactly do that, to make Nix more accountable in terms of using the wisdom that he was going to give pass on to Nick's. So for Nick's to adopt that, which would go against Nick's brain, because as you said, he was offered somebody of that nature at the very beginning, and he said, no, I don't want it.
Yeah.
But now he's accountable. He's got, this guy, he's really accountable. He can't just say, well, this is how it's going to be. If he says this is how it's going to be, then he's going to be held very responsible for that off the field that we don't see. So,
I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, big man. I think a little tension amongst the coaches is like creative tension is a good thing. I just wonder though how Matthew Nicks will respond to that, because might be my personal impression, but I've just felt like in the space of a fairly good 3 weeks of footy, he's been kind of flat.
Maybe. I don't know. Maybe you're looking to it further than me, Dean. He's still got the penchant for saying stuff he shouldn't say though. Like he just, I don't know if it's speaking his mind or he panics or something. But sometimes he just has the wrong answers for certain questions. He was asked the other day about SANFL. He said the form doesn't really matter in the SANFL or something like that.
Yeah.
I thought, what the hell? Come on, mate. What are you saying? Like I remember when he said Bryce Gibbs was like such an important part of our team, and he got dropped the next week, or Smithy's a big part of our future, although he's back in the team, so maybe he was right. But or that Murphy's in the best form of his career, but he can't get a game. I think sometimes he says things to make people feel better, or to make the club look better, or himself, or whatever. He's still doing that. But at the same time, I don't know if I sense any. I think he was pretty relieved on the weekend. To be honest, he looked like someone that.
Yeah, I mean, he came out and just the fact that he said, I asked the players what they wanted to do. It seems like a real shift, and he said that he's doing less around the place, and he wasn't, he wasn't high fiving anyone when he said that.
I thought that was an odd statement to make actually for a coach.
Yeah, like imagine just going out to the players and saying, "Oh, help me out here, boys. What am I going to do?" Like,
I don't do as much now.
No, it is a curious one. I mean, everyone has their quirks and everything, and Nixie certainly has his. But at the same time, I just thought he looked really relieved. I think that was a big game for the club and him as a coach.
Big game for his career. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to sort of to validate him as a coach and the team that he's put together and everything. And he probably knew that in some ways it probably didn't answer the critics completely, because it was the way the game went down. But,
no, that's right. Yeah.
But so I still think there'll be a bit of element to that. I don't think we're fully proven yet, and to that extent, I don't think Nixie's fully proven himself yet. But yeah, that's interesting, Fiend. I hadn't really thought about that, but I'll keep an eye on that.
Yeah, just keep an eye. Like I said, I can be a little bit hyper vigilant when it comes to that sort of stuff, and it just sometimes it just popped out at me on the weekend. I thought, wonder whether there's just been a little bit of a change in the dynamic in that box.
Some of the chat think we're being a bit harsh, but we've also put up with a lot of shit over the last couple of years as well, and some very odd moves and things that have cost matches, etc. So, look, we're just calling it as we see it, and we're not wanting Nick to fail. We want him to succeed. So, please don't take anything we're saying as trying to smash Nick. What we're trying to do is
I agree, man.
No, but in the chat, I think some people are misinterpreting where we're coming from.
That's fine.
He had failed up until the end of last year. In my opinion, he had. And the club saw it that way too, which is why they got Murray Davis. But
that's why, Tim, after we lost the Richmond game, that I was thankfully in Vietnam for, and otherwise I wouldn't have. And we couldn't do the podcast that week because I couldn't get connectivity. But if we'd have done the podcast that week, we might have lost all our followers because I was ready to dump the fucking thing. that's when Tim Silver's decided to do his review. And I think as a consequence of that, because 2024 was an abomination. After 2023, like going backwards the way we did in 24, the club had every right to question where they were headed. And I agree. I don't want to take anything away from Matthew Nicks because whatever's happening, we've improved. Now, if that's on Matthew, then great. If that's Matthew taking instruction or advice from other people, that's great too, because no one has all the answers. And like you say, Mac, we just want Nicks and the coach's box to succeed, because if they succeed, then we do. So,
totally.
All I'm saying is that I've detected a possible change in the dynamic in the coach's box. That's all I'm saying. And who knows? I could be full of shit.
No, and it is, and full credit to Nicks in one way. That we were an absolute basket case when he took over, and he's got us to the point where we are a competitive club. Now we don't want him just to stop there. We want him to go further. Now I think the club has deemed that to go further, it's more than one man's job, which is why they brought in Murray Davis. And now, and we know that Nicks didn't want an assistant because he made that very clear when he was appointed. But I think it's good that the club are not saying you aren't any good, Nixie. What they're saying is the challenge ahead of you is big, and so we're going to give you assistance whether you like it or not. And so that way, it can only make you better. And I think what the club has done is very, very good. And it's reflected in the improvement in our game plan. Our game plan's definitely changed. You have to admit, you'd have to be blind not to notice that it's changed. And that is part of what the Nicks has done, and it's definitely part of the input from Murray Davis and the team.
Well, you don't know whether
together.
you don't know whether it's the input of Murray Davis. That's the thing. We're only surmising why. But it seems
there's more. But there's more than one person talking about it, and I'm looking at it now. There's more than and I think they're doing it more as a team now, and I think that's reflected is more of a team in the coaching panel, and that's reflecting on the field, more of a team on the field, because they've got a very distinct game plan and a distinct style, and they have actually adjusted in matches as well, which is good. So it means that.
I don't know whether we've adjusted in matches, Mac. We've certainly changed our game plan since the Collingwood loss. I still think we can get a bit bogged down during. I don't know whether we've got different modes during. I haven't seen much evidence of that yet.
No, but I think, and somebody else throws out a huge point in the chat. Losing Rahili wasn't helpful, because he really did he was a guy that organised our forward structure and our forward game plan. So I just think that Nick's big challenge now is that he is going to get us into the finals this year. And I think that the challenge for him is he's got to win a final. That's the way I look at it, mate. That to be there the time he's been, we nearly made the finals and should have made the finals 2 years ago. We fell into a great big morass of shit last year, and this year it's back on track and looking good. And I think that he's got to go one step further. He's got to not only get us in the finals, we've got to win a final. If to give him an extension of the contract, I would want a winning final this year.
Do you think that's a fair KPI, Brownie?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
or is getting us in enough?
Well, getting us in isn't. I suppose depends how we go in the final. If we're insipid and we get absolutely smashed, and it's clear that our game style can't handle finals football, then I don't know if it is enough. But if we happen to go down, but we play pretty well, I'd say he's got another year anyway, hasn't he?
Yeah.
So I just don't see the need to pull the trigger until late next year. I think that's really what they're going to do. And if we didn't make finals, he would have been given the arse. But there's no way they're going to, now that we're going to make the 8, there's no way they're going to get rid of him. So I think we just keep our powder dry until the season's end next year, and don't do anything stupid like, Port did it and we did it. We gave him another 2 years after we nearly made the finals in 23, and that was a bad move, really.
Yeah, big man.
Yeah, we did Pike and Sando as well, so we got history in that regard. Yeah, look, I think it's funny if you ask most supporters of most clubs, aside from the ones that are probably in the top 2 to 3 clubs, they'll all rag on their coach. Like most supporters will say, "Oh, our coach is no good. We want someone else." Blah blah blah. Even if they're going half decent, and so I guess we're no different to them in that regard. But I just made a comment earlier. I said that it can't be underestimated that for all the shit we give Nix, he did pick up a club that was fundamentally just broken. Like it was shattered after the whole camp debacle, the Pike fallout, and just everything that happened after the grand final. And in pretty quick time, there was one. Obviously, that 2020 year was poor, but he managed to put the group together again and have obviously what was, even if we weren't performing particularly well on the field, it did seem to be a pretty connected group off the field, and that was a seriously good, important thing to do, and an impressive thing to do given how bad things had gotten before then. So that and then that has to be absolutely applauded for Nix. But at the same time, it's 2025 and expectations change, and we have to keep driving more and more higher standards from our coaching group, including Nix. And he's not alone. It's not just him, but he's obviously the captain of the shit. So yeah, like I'm still have some grievances with the way in which he trusts youth at our club, and I think that we still are risking walking to a period of not exposing enough youth, particularly the last 1 or 2 years, and when we need to replace players in our team. It's obviously going to be Tex and Smith soon, but then beyond that, Laird, then Neil Borland, and then before you know it, Keys and Dawson, and everyone's going to be in their 30s. That's something we need to bring the new brigade in. That I don't know if they're going to be exposed enough to the AFL system to perform as well as they should have, and we might be in a bit of a no man's land. I could be wrong. Who knows? He might be an absolute genius, but it just feels like now that we're having some success on the field, it's easy to sort of forget that we're actually still a reasonably young list, and we need to keep blood and youth. And I know it's hard to say, hey guys who turn up for the weekend and beat Brisbane, we're going to drop 2 or 3 of you to play some kids. Like, it's hard to do that, but you got to pick your moments. And it feels like unless we cop an injury to a player, we never even consider really playing kids from the last couple of drafts, which is just a bit frustrating because I think that could come back to bite us down the track. But we'll have to wait and see on that. I was just also going to say, Fiend, that I'm still not convinced that Nixie knows Charlie Edwards exists.
No, it's actually quite possible. and it's a real shame for. I mean, you don't know what gets said behind closed doors, and they might be in constant communication. Who knows? But certainly publicly, his attitude towards Charlie's been pretty disappointing. It's appeared to be dismissive. I'm very much on the same page as you, big man. I think, he was the right coach for the time in terms of getting the band back together during those tough years and through COVID and all the rest of it. Our query, hasn't it, Macca, has always been, has he got the chops to be a premiership coach? I still think the jury's out on that. And it feels like it's out for the club as well. The jury's out in terms of the decision makers at the club, Olsen and Davis and whoever the footy director is, Balm or Rue or whoever. It feels like they're taking a wait and see as well. So it'll be interesting to see how it pans out. But as far as who's calling the shots, I couldn't really give a damn. It's great to be able to talk about the Crows in such a positive manner, and I don't think any of us on this podcast in our wildest dreams would have been looking after 13 rounds at us sitting top of third on the table with the best percentage in the comp.
No, that's a fair comment. And I don't think any of us, we would have hoped for it, but not really believed it would happen.
And to be frank, as we said at the beginning of the year, if he does pull off a premiership in his tenure, it will be one of the greatest coaching performances in AFL history, and that's not underestimating.
Coming from a long way back, so in that 100%. Fairness term, it is
statistically.
Well, I can't
statistically, it surpasses any other coach, including Clarkson. Statistically,
yeah, that's what I think. I think so. That's how bad we were.
And that's probably why I've been so doubtful, because that's a pretty big call to make. But if he does make it over the next year or two, then I'll be the first to send him a box of chocolates, because that'll be a mammoth achievement.
Build a statue.
All right, we've hit. Oh, let's not get carried away. We've got Blighty.
Put it in your front yard.
The trouble with the statue of Matthew Nix, it'd get covered with flies on his bald nut. Be like a little flypaper magnet. Anyway.
Oh, God.
Very good.
All right. 2.5 hours. We've done it again, gentlemen. So, Brownie, you're tipping us to lose?
Just, yeah.
Mackie, you're tipping us to win?
11 points, yep.
Big man's done the reverse minus.
Yep. Let's make it 3 weeks in a row.
And I reckon we're at least 4 goals up. So there you go. Look, thanks to everyone who's joined us again on YouTube and on Discord, of course. Given that we're up against an actual match, it was a really good crowd tonight. So thank you all for joining us. Have a good week. Enjoy the long weekend day tomorrow for those. Is it national? It is national, isn't it? So enjoy the long weekend.
Yeah, it is national, yeah.
And we'll see you on Discord on Friday night for the game day chat for the Hawthorn game, and again next Sunday for the wrap. Until then, farewell, gentlemen. We'll see you next week.
Catch you later.
Yeah. Good night.
See you
Good night,
guys.
all.
Cheers.